Gospel reading for this day comes from the Gospel of John. It picks up where we left off last week. It's the 14th chapter, verses 15 through 21, and you can find that in the New Testament on page 109. John 14, verses 15 through 21. The words of Jesus to his disciples gathered around the table. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to be with you forever. This is the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him because he abides with you, and he will be in you. I will not leave you orphans. I am coming to you. In a little while, the world will no longer see me, but you will see me. Because I live, you also will live. On that day, you will know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. They who have my commandments and keep them are those who love me, and those who love me will be loved by my Father, and I will love them and reveal myself to them. For the word of God in Scripture, for the word of God among us, for the word of God within us. Thanks be to God. Who here truly knows who they are? Seriously, do any of us really know ourselves? You'd think we live with ourselves enough that we might actually know ourselves, but in truth, we really don't know who we are. For most of us, if not all of us, when we are asked that question, we usually answer with a particular, yet at the same time abstract, in its partiality, answer. In most instances, this takes on the form of a narrative about who we are. Our narratives include stories about our origin, our place of birth, where we grew up, the stories of family life, when we were growing up. But is that who we are? But they might also include narratives about our careers, our vocations, the work we do. In our public relationships, these narratives take the shape of defining how we want others to think of us. This type of narrative seeks to place us in the hierarchy of public life of the empire, with our own place and status in that empire. Is that who we really are? Sometimes we use our personal narratives to justify who we are in the face of questions that, at least in our mind, do not have a simple answer, or do not have an answer that immediately comes to mind. Sometimes these narratives serve the purpose of begging or sidestepping an uncomfortable question. But are these narratives really who we are? In today's reading from the Gospel of John, we read about Jesus trying to make something plain to his followers. And it seems like no matter how plain Jesus tries to make it, his followers more often than not, don't get it. But what he's trying to make plain is that all he is asking of his disciples and those who seek to be followers in the way of Jesus is that they embrace the love that he has lived among them and among us as a goal for our own lives, as a way for us to live our lives. Jesus wants us to identify ourselves to this way of living a life of love. Jesus calls us to live a life shaped by love. He acknowledges that choosing to see reality through the lens of love in the midst of empire is very difficult, at the least. The love Jesus wants his hearers to embrace is not some abstract philosophical principle or concept, but the lived reality revealed in the life and relationships and actions of a simple Nazarene who looks and talks very much like a regular human being. Jesus feeds the hungry. He touches lepers. He heals the sick and speaks and acts toward women with care and respect. In this way, love is seen in the life of Jesus as a life of service and compassion for those around him. Jesus demands that we share a full identity with him in this service and compassion, and through this life of love, share with him a full identity in God. But we humans cannot seem to avoid twisting our narratives to justify or explain why we have failed to live up to the example of love, as witnessed to by the life of love lived by Jesus. But Jesus promises those who are followers in his way what our translation calls the Spirit of truth. In Greek it's paraclete, but the Spirit of truth is a good way of translating that. Because the Spirit of truth is a particular way of understanding the work of the Spirit. And Jesus is saying, I'm sending you another advocate in the Spirit. Because he is the first advocate. Jesus is the first counselor. Jesus is the first guide as to how to live our lives. But he claims he will not leave us orphaned in his leading. And that this new spirit that Jesus is bringing to those who seek to follow him is a spirit of truth. For some, this spirit of truth may sound like good news. But for others, it sounds like the ever-present judgment of our failure to speak truth in our narratives. Not only the narratives we tell to others, but more importantly, the narratives we tell to ourselves. Yet without the Spirit of truth, how can we ever hope to live a life of love as Jesus lived his life? How can we ever know who we truly are without the presence of the Spirit of truth? Is there any other way we can hope for a life that is not fragmented into an abstract notion or a justification of who we are? We cannot see the Spirit. We can only experience it. But we can see through the witness of generations passed down, one to the next, Jesus and the life he lived. We can see him healing and teaching, and we can see him dying in his faithfulness. Following in the way of Jesus has always been about learning to live a life in unity with Jesus and with God. All too often we in the church have wanted to make the Christian life about what we do and what we do not do, who we include in our community of faith and who we exclude. But that's not what the Christian life that Jesus is teaching his disciples is about at all. What Jesus is teaching those who would follow Christ, follow him, is to live a life that is defined by the very love that he lived. Love of God and love of neighbor. This way of love is not some sort of sentimental love or romantic love. This life of love is definitely not easy. For it is a life of sacrifice and of compassion. The way of Jesus requires us to sacrifice the narratives of empire and the narratives of justification of our own lives through the lens of consumer capitalism and the systems of power that exploit creation for the benefit or comfort, wealth, and status of our individual lives and the community in which we live. The life of love requires us to develop the discipline of compassion for all those who live within our realm of community, including the creatures, the flora, the minerals, air, water. We live among all of these. And the life of love and compassion requires us to recognize their membership in this community in which we learn by faith to love and hope. Both sacrifice and compassion are dependent on our ability to develop a life of affection. I've been highly influenced by Wendell Berry in this understanding of how you can't get to compassion without first getting to affection. You cannot be compassionate to another person if you don't first have affection for them. And affection requires a certain degree of imagination. You have to imagine what it would be like to have the life the other has. And to learn to love that other life as it is, as different and unique, no matter how big of a character or how mundane. The life of love calls us to form affection for that other so that we can have compassion. And with compassion, we can create a community of love where everyone is a member and every living creature, all of creation, is a member of this community of faith. And affection requires that we work to know and live in the midst of the spirit of truth. It is all too common and easy for us to deceive ourselves in our attempts to deceive others. And it is the spirit of truth that calls us back to the reality of the love that Christ has called us to live. It is the spirit of truth that we turn to guide us, to counsel us, and to comfort us in a life that is sure to be rejected by the world around us and the needs, the addictions of the empire. So how do we know who we are? In the gospel record, we see Jesus operating in community with his disciples and others in greater Judea and Samaria. While Jesus recognizes, heals, and teaches individuals, he does so in the context of a community, First, his disciples that he has gathered around him, and then his neighborhood in Galilee, extending all the way to Jerusalem and Judea. Everywhere he went, what he touched, who he healed, all of that was done in the context of a community. We too are called to live a life of love in the context of community. To come to know ourselves, to learn to see the world through the lens of love as Jesus loved, we need to do the work of sacrifice and compassion in the context of our communities. Our communities of faith and our communities of everyday life and the connections we make through work, play, and worship. In this life of sacrifice and compassion within our community, we take as our identity the narrative of Jesus' love. Jesus' love of God and Jesus' love of neighbor. Our own covenant begins with this bold claim about our identity. We are together only to be the church of God in Christ. We are not here by chance, but God, through grace, is making of us a fellowship to embody and to express the Spirit of Christ. That is the very beginning, the preamble of how we as Faith United Church of Christ in Little Rock claim our identity. It is not our identity as individuals or even as a congregation. It is the identity of Christ's church that is seeking as imperfectly and as partially as we human beings can to live a life that expresses the very love that Jesus lived. And that requires sacrifice and compassion. As Jesus celebrates Passover with his disciples, what we have come to celebrate as the Lord's Supper, Jesus takes the opportunity to say farewell to his disciples. And that's what we hear in John's Gospel in the 14th chapter. Out of compassion, Jesus wants his disciples and all those who seek to follow in his ways that we are not alone. For he has left us with the Spirit of truth. That the life of love exemplified in his sacrifice and his compassion is the way forward in his absence. That we, as his disciples living a life of love, we will do even greater deeds than he himself had accomplished. And in this shared life with and through Jesus, we will share in his identity and through him find our own identity and unity with God. This life we are called to identify ourselves with is a life shaped by love. This is our prayer. This is our faith. This is our hope. This is our love. This is who we are called to be. In the unity of the Creator, our friend Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Those right now, please stand for our hymn number 58, Spirit of Love.